Hello, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a good day or had a good day depending on what time it is. Today I wanted to come on here because I made a video about how I made this tray and you're thinking, whoa, this tray looks so nice. You're gonna get a tutorial. So yes and no. So this video is basically I recorded how I made this tray, but towards the end of the tray I realized I made a big mistake. And you may be wondering where the mistake is. I mean, we can also look at the back and you're like, what's the mistake? Is it this part? That's not even a big deal. No, it's not even that part. So this mistake, and I'm sorry for the quality, usually where I record is blocked by a lot of curing pieces and resin and molds, so I can't record over there. But I wanted to make sure I got this video done as soon as possible. But the problem that happened was, it's so hard to see, but basically, and you'll see it during the video, but basically in the middle of this tray, instead of sitting flat like a tray should be, like flat, it's more like a mountain, or it has like a bulge to it. So that happened because when I was doming the back of my piece, the sun likes to shine from my window where I dome my pieces, and it softened my piece because of how hot the sun was on my piece. So since I had it doming on my doming mat, the piece was just sinking in. And this, I believe, was before, it may have been from my first dome or before my first dome. We'll see when we get into the video, but it just started going in. And you can't tell from the back because I ended up doing 2 domes on this piece. You'll see that in the video too. But yeah, it's basically like it's sitting up higher than it should. And it's just so hard to show. I don't know if that shows a bit, like it's at an angle. You can kind of see it sitting at an angle instead of being flat. Yeah, it's almost like a mountain. It's a little curve. Sorry, I'm holding this with one hand. I usually have on my tripod. But yeah, it's a little curve that we have here. Instead of being flat like it should be, it's sitting up like that. It's just going in, and it shouldn't be going in. I was gonna see maybe if I could show you that way. Maybe like that right there kind of shows like a little curve in it. But for the most part, basically it's a fail for me, just because a tray should not do this. If you're gonna be putting water bottles or anything else that you want on the tray, you want it to be completely flat. You don't want it to exactly be at an angle. So I ended up just giving this tray to my mom just because I was upset with it. And upset that I didn't realize in the first place, before I even did the 2 domes on the back, that this was starting to happen. I just kept going with it. I thought it wasn't a problem. When my piece was soft, I thought it was just maybe like the handles that were maybe getting kind of wonky, but I made a big mistake. And I'm mainly making this video because at first, after all this happened, I was just going to throw away all the footage I had in making this piece, but the piece looks awesome. And you can make an awesome tray like this despite or minus what I've done. You can kind of hear it's not as even, probably because as well that it's sunken in. So I would probably need to do maybe another dome to make it more even than it is. But yeah, I told people on Instagram how I was planning on deleting the footage and stuff because it just didn't come out right. But someone ended up DMing me and saying that mistakes happen. And a lot of people on YouTube don't tend to show a lot of mistakes. So it looks like most shops don't make mistakes. And I get where they're coming from, and it's so true. A lot of us don't talk about the mistakes. We only want to show off what we're proud of and the things that come out right. Because mistakes like this, they suck. I just hope, I still wanted to put out that video so you can kind of still see my process. You can see how I make mistakes along the way and how I got to, I guess, not really a failure, but just a mistake. I think it's a failure just because I've never had this happen before, but this is my second time making a tray, and it is my first time, as you'll see when we get into the video, me actually putting the foil in. I'm sorry for this little introduction being long, but yeah, we'll just get right into the video. So this is the foil I'm gonna be putting in the tray. We won't need this right now because we're gonna be doing some other things before, but I just wanted to show you so you could get kind of idea of what that's gonna look like. So make sure already, this is gonna be a little bit different. I already have my cups out. I haven't poured resin into them yet because I figured I can actually show you me pouring resin into them. Because I usually already have resin mixed up and I'm ready to pour, but I don't think you ever see me actually pour and mix it. It'll make the video a bit long, so I'll try to go through it and try to show you how I do it. So if there's like time skips and cuts, that's the reason why for it. But yeah, we're gonna get into it. Make sure you are in a well-ventilated area. So I'm doing this right in front of my window. That's where I do all my pours and everything involving resin. It's a well-ventilated space. Make sure that you have a mask that you're gonna wear. I'm gonna be putting this on, so I'm gonna be sounding different than I do now. And also, make sure that you are wearing gloves. This is just proper safety that you should be doing. So I'm gonna be putting my mask on now. We're gonna get our gloves on. So we're not gonna need this tray right now. I'm just gonna move it out of the way. So I'll be showing you the resin I'm gonna be using. I use 2-part epoxy resin, and this is from Amazing Clear Class by Eliminate. And I'm actually a ambassador for their brand for Eliminate. So you can use code WISHES10 to get 10% off your order of this resin or anything on Eliminate's website. I'll have all that in my description, but we're using 2-part epoxy resin. This is 2 gallons. That's like so big to show. That was part A, and here is part B. Yeah, I'm going to be using 3 different colors, and they have glitter and stuff in them. Normally glitter sticks to it. I usually always wipe out the cups with alcohol to get any resin out, but there's glitter that still gets stuck in it, so I don't really worry about it except when I'm using clear resin, because sometimes the glitter will come off and you'll see it on clear resin, but sometimes it doesn't do that. It's not a big deal for me, but it hasn't been such an issue with me. But I know some people can be particular and may not want this as their cup. So I'm first going to start with the part A. I think I'm going to pour 30 part A in each cup, and all the cups on the side here, they actually have the numbers there, so you know where to stop. I'll have this in my description too. Anything that I'm using, I'll try to have the information for it in the description. But if I don't put it there, just let me know and I'll try to link you all the information that I can. So yeah, we're gonna pour 30 of part A in each cup. You have to be careful when doing this, because if you pour too much of one part, it can mess your resin up. And we're going to pour another 30 of now the part B. So we're gonna have 60 each in total. You're now going to take either a popsicle stick or silicone stir stick, depending on which one you want to use, and stir your cups. So I'm going to show you first how I do it with 1 cup. You want to mix really slow. And I have a really bad habit of not mixing slow, and that could cause a lot of bubbles in your resin, which isn't a big deal for me because I know how to get rid of the bubbles with like a heat gun. Some people know how to use a torch. But if you don't have those tools, or maybe you don't want to work with them, then it works well if you stir really slow. I wouldn't really give it like a time, like stir for 5 minutes, stir for this long. You want to stir until the part A, part B are mixed up all the way. So right now, let's see if I can show you. Can't really see it too well, but this isn't clear. The resin is very cloudy because it still needs to be mixed up and stirred for longer. But once it gets mixed up all the way, then the resin will be clear, and you'll see it when you lift it up. It won't look like that. Okay, I am back after stirring the first cup, and I maybe stirred for about, I want to say, 8 minutes, 10 minutes. It's really just stirring until it's clear, so you should be able to see through the resin instead of it being cloudy. Sorry, I can't really show you. Instead of cloudy, you'll see when you're actually mixing it, the difference between that and this. And it's ready to go, so I'm going to go ahead and stir both of these. I also wanted to mention that the work times on these can go by pretty fast, especially when you're stirring slow, which is why I tend to stir faster. That first cup that we have, since it's all mixed together, is now on a cure time, so it's ready to use within like 40 minutes. But if these take both 10 minutes each, then you're going to only have like 20 minutes to get it poured. So just keep that in mind when you have multiple cups of resin, that the first cup and the cups after are going to cure way faster than the last cup. So you may want to stir faster. I know a lot of people have trouble with bubbles. When we get to like the last cup, you'll probably be able to feel that this cup, the first cup that you started on, is a lot hotter than the last cup. But yeah, just keep that in mind when you're mixing it, that the first cup you may run into it curing a lot faster. Okay, so I now have all three mixed. If you're doing it with me, you can already feel sort of your first cup is starting to warm up. So go ahead, I'm going to be using these three colors for these 3 cups. You can use paint to color your resin. I use Apple Barrel, and then I think I only have this one in this brand, but I use a lot of Apple Barrel paints, which are like the $1 paints. Super affordable to get and use for your resin. One by one, I'm just going to squeeze some paint in. You want to make sure you don't use too much, because your resin cannot cure properly if you use too much paint. So just start with a little bit. If you need more, you can always add more. And with this, you want to mix slowly as well. And that's pretty light in color, so I think I'm going to add a bit more paint to it. So you mainly just want to do that. I'm just going to do that with all 3. I'm going to add in there right there. And if you have any bubbles, depending on what you have, your heat gun or your torch, I'm going to go over it with the heat gun just to pop some of them. I think it's also important to note that using a heat gun, it can heat up your resin, which makes your resin get ready to cure fast. So just keep that in mind when you're using a heat gun, that try not to use too much heat. And also, if using a torch and in the mold and stuff, the resin can stick to the mold, not coming out of the mold, so you can have problems there. I've heard people having their heat gun change color of the resin. I haven't had that problem, but just keep that in mind, that to use things in moderation when it comes to that, just because there is a potential that something could go wrong with it. But I have been using a heat gun. I love using it. It has saved me with so many of my bubble issues. So now we're going to get the mold and we're going to start pouring. So mainly I am planning to just pour the resin in the sides here, and to at least get it up to the edge there. So we're just going to go ahead and start just pouring some color in the sides here and see how that goes. And you want to make sure that you don't get it. So I'm going to kind of take this out of the frame. On the front part here, it won't be a big deal if you get it on here, but that's where my foil is going to go, so I don't really want to touch that area. We can always clean it up with some alcohol and a paper towel, but it gets a bit messy. So I'm going to go ahead, just take an edge here and pour some resin. So I'm just going to keep doing that. I'm going to keep just pouring the resin into the sides like this. I find it easiest to just pull on the side and pour some. If you like, every time you pour, you can use your heat gun or your torch. Again, be careful with both to pop any bubbles if you see any in the sides.
I may have gotten too much resin. The 60-60 may not have been needed. We may just need to do 40-40. That you have some molds ready to pour in any extra resin. I wasn't sure how much it was going to fill up. I just wanted to have a lot more, just in case that way I didn't have to worry about making more. So yeah, I definitely didn't even need this much resin. You can probably use 40, you may even be able to use 20. I don't know why I thought it was going to be a lot more than that. Yeah, just learn from my mistake there. So now I'm going to get a toothpick and really carefully just kind of go through, trying to try and mix it all. Yeah, that's probably as mixed as we will get it. And I'm going to get a paper towel with some alcohol on it and try to wipe a little bit of this excess resin that I got on there. Be careful that you don't actually get enough resin on the sides there. But we will be coming back once this is tacky, so 2 hours. But since it's basically the end of the day for me, I'm going to be coming back once this is cured. But you can do your clear layer and put your foil in it when it's tacky. So in 2 hours you can come back and do that if you want. But just know for me in this video, I am coming back after a day. So it's already cured. It's going to be cured. And I already mixed up my resin. I have 80 resin total, so I did 40 part B and 40 part A. Already mixed up. I'm going to be using my heat gun to get rid of any bubbles. You can already see some in there. And for this part, we are putting in this foil. And slowly I'm just going to start pouring the resin from a distance onto it. And pouring resin from a distance like this is supposed to help with bubbles popping because they're hitting it from so high. Also, you want to make sure that you're doing it slowly. Mine is sort of fast, but it's also a lot of resin. Last time we were pouring the sides, I made too much resin. I may have made too much resin for this middle part too, but it's better be safe than sorry because making more resin during the fact of this part isn't fun. So I'm just pouring resin, trying to fill as much as I can, and then I'm just going to use the heat gun. So like that's a good amount to start out for now. I'm going to use the heat gun to pop some bubbles. And during this part, I like to use my popsicle stick, the same stick that I used to stir, to push some of the bubbles up while having the heat gun on. So you'll see a little bit of that. So we're going to just keep adding more resin to the middle part here. Basically, we want to cover this whole middle part. You don't have to worry about the resin going over to the sides and the color part. The middle part needs to be full so I could put the big foil in. So I'm just going to keep covering, keep adding resin. I'm probably also going to put a popsicle stick underneath this because it seems like the resins want to shift down here. And I want to say when using a popsicle stick or like a toothpick, you want to be careful you're not scratching your mold as you're moving the resin around because it can ruin your mold. After you feel you have most of your bubbles popped, we can now get the foil. And with the foil, you want to turn it over and put it in face down. As you can see, there's already bubbles underneath it. So we're going to want to push those out with our popsicle stick or whatever tool you're using. And this is making sure that the thing is getting all the bubbles from underneath and we're securing a place for it underneath it. And those bubbles coming out, you can take your heat gun and start popping them. You want to do this until you are comfortable with all the bubbles being out of it. Mine's starting to get less and less, but I still can see a few tiny ones. Because when curing, those will either stay on there and you'll just see bubbles, or they'll just break open and you'll have a hole. And I'm just moving it to make sure I like the position of it, that the two ends match up a little bit. And you can see it's shifting. We don't want it up like that, or at least I don't want it up like that. You have to make sure too when you're working with foils in your piece or any types of cards or stickers that you want to make sure it's not moving around, because these can easily move around and shift, especially if your table's not even and stuff is shifting one way. So looking, there might also be some just small bubbles and micro bubbles that, I mean, you could try to get them all underneath. I've been trying to go at it and get them, but it may not happen. It may just be one of those things that will be micro bubbles there. We have to dome it. I'm going to dome the piece either way, but just keep that in mind that this is such a big foil that it's just hard to move it around and get those bubbles from underneath. You can keep playing with it, but also the resin is going to start getting tacky and heating up because I keep using the heat gun. So it's best to start just leaving it alone, and we'll come back in 2 hours when it's tacky and we'll do our last layer of color. It's been 2 hours, so the resin is now tacky. You should be able to tell if you stick or touch your resin, it should be like sticky like that. I already went ahead and mixed up my resin like we did in the beginning. I have my white resin, I have gold, and I have some red. And I did 40 of each. So 40 white, 40 gold, 40 red. So 20 part A and 20 part B in each one. So for this, I'm just gonna go ahead and start pouring in the resin. You don't have to worry about pouring it in any specific type of way. It's really just up to you and how you want to do it. Yeah, you can just have fun with it. Maybe just have white, red, and gold all mixed together, have it on one side. For this, I'm going to be mixing them together, and you'll see how I do that. So, alright, I'm going to start pouring now. So I'm just doing some zigzagging here, trying to get the color where the red isn't at, and I'll do the same with the gold. So this gold is more see-through than I thought it was going to be, but we'll just go with it. And after I get that layer poured in, or I get 3 layers, after I get 3 layers poured in, I take a heat gun and I go through it. And I can see some bubbles underneath the resin, so like I was doing before, I'm just going to take a popsicle stick and lift some of the bubbles up. It looks like you probably, if you want, you can even mix more resin. I think this is just enough, the minimum resin that you need of having 40 in each cup. That may be more on the safe side to do 60 in each cup, just to make sure that this is filled all the way. But yeah, overall it looks pretty good. You can't really see the foil anymore, and you can see it in some places like there, and maybe up there. It's the lighter resin that I had. So if that bugs you, maybe use a darker pigment where it won't really show. You can try and mix your resin together where that area is to make sure it doesn't look like that. Alright, so I decided to come back with more resin because there's some parts here in the resin that I see where you can kind of see the foil, or the back of the foil for the Chiefs logo. And I just want to put more resin there and see if it ends up hiding it more. If not, it's not a big deal. But it looks like I could put a bit more resin in there. So I kind of want to see how that goes. So I'm just going to do like before. I'm just going to put resin in. Use the heat gun where I need to. But I just want to come back and let you know that I was adding more resin. Just so that part isn't cut out. And it should be fine because the resin isn't tacky yet, because it hasn't been sitting for that long. So it should be able to blend in fine with the other resin. So yeah, like that, you're starting not to be able to see where that stuff was. And like that, it is better covered up than it was before. You can't see, from at least what I'm looking at, you can't see any of the outline of the Chiefs logo. So that's good. It just seems like I probably need to do 60 resin instead of the 40 for each one. So just keep that in mind if you're also doing that.
Good morning. So it is the next day. We have the tray here ready to demold. You can kind of see that the resin that I ended up pouring again to cover those black lines where you could see the actual symbol. You can kind of see it right there too, but it's covered a lot better than it was last time, but it didn't mix so well. You could kind of see where the new resin was poured and kind of where the mixed resin was from the last pour. I mean, it happens. I probably should just kept going through and trying to mix it better, but let's see how it turned out. There we go. Actually, it looks really good. I see a few bubble areas, but not bad for what it could have been with all the bubbles before that we had to push out. It actually looks really good. I'm really happy with how it turned out. This is my first time putting a big foil in it, so I think it looks really neat. Even the resin in the background looks pretty cool to me. I'm not too sure what people call this effect, but that's really neat. Again, here's the back. I think this area came out pretty cool. It didn't mix how I wanted to, but that's all right. Okay, so now that we have my tray demolded, we are going to want to dome the front part of the tray, around the sides, the inner sides of the tray, and this top part. And because there is chances, because we're doming this top part, to get overspill, and you don't want a bunch of overspill on the back and on the sides. What I'm going to be showing you is I'm going to be using liquid latex to help with that. But I just want to say I do still struggle with that. Even when I put it on here, I sometimes can still just get some overspill on the sides here. It happens. If you have that happen, if we have that happen, we're just gonna sand it off, and you will see that you'll have some sand marks still there. You can use UV resin if you want to make it go away, or some people like to polish their pieces after they sand them, but let's hope we don't have that problem. Since we're gonna be using liquid latex, I'm turning it over on the back, and we're gonna take our liquid latex. I also have Q-tips here, and just so you know, and a little cup if I need to put any liquid latex in it. So I'm just going to pour liquid latex all on the back here. I'm going to try to pick up the tray and just move it around a bit. But I'm now going to take the Q-tip and I'm going to try to just bring it, all the liquid latex over. And if it starts falling off on the sides, that's fine, because we're going to need to cover the sides with liquid latex as well. So I'm just gonna go ahead and cover the back, and if you see that you need some more liquid latex, just go ahead and pour it on there. I should say, when working with liquid latex, be careful who your customer is, or just be aware if you're allergic to latex as well. Because if you're giving an item to a person that's been in contact with liquid latex, they may have a reaction to it. So just keep that in mind. I always make sure, especially when I sell pieces that have been domed like this and had liquid latex on it, to disclose that they've been in contact with liquid latex. So I prefer if people don't buy them, if they've been in contact, if they have a latex allergy. It's better to be safe than sorry. So now I'm going to take this cup here and I'm going to pour some liquid latex in it. I do know some people also use glue instead of latex, which could work out better for people. I'm not sure if there's a glue allergy for anyone, but that may work out better, especially with those that have latex allergies. You just do the same thing like I'm doing, but you use glue. So right now I'm just covering, I'm taking this liquid latex with a Q-tip, and I'm just dipping it and covering the sides of this tray with it. Now when you're putting liquid latex on the sides, you may want to go over it one more time, so go over it with liquid latex twice just to make sure they're really covered, unlike the back, which is covered super white. And the liquid latex, the sides tend to separate and dry faster, and sometimes there's just little spots that don't end up with it. So now that the sides are covered, what we're gonna do is wait for it to dry, the liquid latex to dry. Right now we see it's all white, but once it's dry, it'll be clear. So it won't look like this anymore. You should be able to see the back of your tray, the color of your tray again. It really just depends on how big the piece is and how much liquid latex you use, on how fast it dries. Also how hot or cold the area in which the liquid latex is in. So if it's hotter, it's going to dry faster, but if it's cold, it's going to take a while for your liquid latex to dry. Our liquid latex has dried up. As you can see, it went from being that white to now it is clear. It has been a whole day. I want to say it took probably half a day for it to dry. It is colder here, so that may have affected it, but just keep in mind everyone's different in terms of curing time for the liquid latex as well as resin. But yeah, we're gonna go ahead and lift the tray up so that we could see the front and start pulling some of this liquid latex back. So you want to be careful getting your tray up. You want to try to take as much as the liquid latex that's on the mat or whatever you put it on. That way you aren't pulling the liquid latex just off, because that can happen. It can start getting pulled off of the sides. So here I'm going to just start pulling liquid latex from this rim because we're going to be doming this rim area. So I'm going to lightly just try to pull it back as much as I can. You want to be careful because doing this, like I did right there, can pull more liquid latex back than needed. So just keep in mind, if you do have overspill, this area will still be affected. And I want to make sure there's more, a little bit more liquid latex pulled away from this area, because I don't want the resin to cure with this touching it. But at least by doing this, if there's some overspill, the whole thing won't be covered in it or won't be ruined. You may have some of the sides, depending on how your liquid latex was pulled back. Those areas might have it, but at least the back and all of the sides, depending on how the overspill goes, won't be covered in the resin. Okay, so now that we have all the liquid latex pulled back, we are going to start doming the front of the tray. So we're going to be doming this, the sides, and the top.
I have my resin mixed up. I'm going to just pour a bit of resin from a distance. With that, I'm going to go over it with a heat gun. And I forgot to say, I ended up making 100 resin instead of the 80, so 50 part A, 50 part B, just because I want to make sure, like last time we were pouring the color on the back of the tray, that I don't run out. I just really want to make sure I have enough, even if it's too much. I think that's way better than the opposite. So I'm just going to keep pouring more in. I want to basically fill the tray with resin. So I usually at this part just try to pour in where the spots where the tray doesn't, or the piece doesn't have resin, I should say. And don't be too scared of pouring too much resin, just because we're going to take the resin that's in this tray and push up on the sides and at the top of the tray as well. We're going to be using that resin. So some of this resin you will be losing in this bottom part of the tray, if that makes sense. Alright, I'm going to take my popsicle stick and I'm going to try to plug up some of those areas where maybe it doesn't have enough resin in it. You can pour more resin if you need to. I'm going to go over again with the heat gun. Okay, so now we're going to push up the resin to the sides so we can coat the sides of the piece. So I like to just push up the resin and coat it. So now I try to do this part of pushing up the resin from the bottom of the tray at least 2 times. If you like, you can always pour more resin, take a scoop of resin and put it on the sides. But I've been doing this method for a bit now, so I've just been sticking to it. But if you find another way to do it, definitely do what works best for you. You see there's resin it's not covering because it's taking this resin. You can always pour more at the end if you need to, where it's missing that. But you don't really need to worry about it right now until the end. And don't be afraid if you get a little bit on the top like that, just because that will be covered with resin anyways. But do be careful if you get too much. You don't want to start causing overspill. Okay, so now that we pushed up the resin on the sides, we got that covered, we're going to go through it with the heat gun just to make sure that the resin all falls down, we pop any bubbles. And just know you're making this yourself, so it's not going to be perfect. So if there's bubbles here or there, just know that you tried to do your best to make sure that didn't happen. But there's always still a chance that it could. It's not going to be perfect. It could be perfect to you. That doesn't necessarily mean it's 100% perfect. So just keep that in mind when you're creating as well. Resin is a lot of hard work, and a lot of pieces itself, you could think that's perfect, it's all art, but some people may not think it's perfect either. So just know it's human made, it has flaws. I think I might take resin from this and just scoop it up like this and take a little bit to make sure you're not going to get overspilled. I'm trying to keep more to the edge where the tray is, not on the outside where it could overspill at. So we're just going to go around the tray slowly like that. Because I don't mind resin falling in, but I don't want resin to fall out. And it looks like we made it all the way around. So at this point, you want to take a look to see if you want to add more resin to the sides. Maybe you missed a little edge or two. See if you need to pour more resin in the tray. Maybe there's some holes there. Maybe the sides aren't how you're wanting them to look, so you can add more resin to it. It really just depends on you and how you feel the tray came out after this dome. So usually once I dome pieces, I take a container like this and I cover it with it to make sure no dust or anything lands on it. I want it to cure just like how it looks. I also wanted to note that I only used about 40 resin in total, so you probably didn't need an 80 or 60. You can use 40 or 50, but if you want to be safe just like me, make more than you need. You can always put the rest in some molds that you have. Use that leftover resin for that.
It came out really good. Everything looks really nice. I don't think I had any issues with like a lot of bubbles or anything like that. It just looks like it came out really well. This tray's looking good, so the next thing we're going to want to do is start doming the back. So we're first going to want to take this liquid latex off that we put on here for the front. And this is a time where you'll be able to see if you had any overspill on the sides at all, or maybe it turned out good for you. Looks like so far I don't have any overspill or anything like that. And because of the sun, it's so hot, my piece is wanting to be a bit bendy. So just be careful if you have the same thing going on, that when your resin heats up, it can become soft and you'll be able to bend it and form it. And yeah, the liquid latex should just come off easy like that. Again, doesn't look like I had any overspill issues, which is nice. May need to, well, actually just a little bit right there, which isn't a big issue. That's something that could be easily sanded off. And then just maybe some of the liquid latex being sticky on the tray, which you can always wash off easily. Again, I just want to make sure my piece is not bending wrong or anything like that. Next, we're going to want to do is pour liquid latex in the middle here, on the sides, and on the sides of this tray. We basically want to cover it all again on the front so we can dome the back. Know that for doming your tray like this, it does use a lot of liquid latex. So just keep that in mind when you're doing it. It's better to be safe than sorry, but some people may feel comfortable enough and safe enough to not even use liquid latex. I know I more likely need to use it, even though I would like to skip this step. Alright, so now once we're done with covering the tray with liquid latex, we are now going to wait again, just like we did with the back, for it to cure, or not cure, for it to dry. Okay, now that our liquid latex is dry, we're gonna do like we did on the front when we were trying to dome. We need to pull some of that liquid latex back. So we're just gonna go ahead and turn it on the back and start peeling some of this resin to the back here. You do want to make sure that you don't have too much liquid latex on the sides, that the liquid latex gets stuck to the piece too. Basically like the resin domes over the liquid latex, so you want to be careful with that as well. Okay, now that we pulled back all the liquid latex from around the tray, I'm going to make up some more clear resin.
Okay, so we're back. I have the resin all mixed up. I also wanted to show my logo foil that I'm going to be putting on the back of here. You want to make sure that, oops, seems like it's sticking, that you have it on the right side. So this is the right side that it should be on. So we're going to go ahead and start pouring resin. It's going to be like what we did with the front, except we don't have to worry about the sides or anything, just basically this whole part area. Okay, now that we have a good amount of resin poured on there, I'm going to go over it with the heat gun to pop some bubbles. Okay, I'm going to pour a little bit more to fill some of those holes that you can see there where there's no resin. Here, you're going to take your popsicle stick or whatever you may be using, and I like to just start pushing that resin up close to where the edges. Make sure you're not pushing it too far off that it's causing overspill, but just right to the edge. That way the sides are getting, or not the sides, but close to the edge is getting coated with the resin. Now this is a process you just have to be patient with. You don't want to be too fast, or you could accidentally just get a lot of resin pushed over. So now that we pushed it over, you're going to look for any spots on the back of your piece that may have holes, so it may need more resin. Not holes is like there's a bubble that popped and there's a hole, more like there's no resin there, where the piece isn't covered with any resin. Just want to make sure that you add some so that you don't have any spots like that. Now that we covered it, or went around it again for a second time, I'm going to go ahead and add my logo foil in this bottom right corner. So we're going to take the popsicle stick, we're going to push down on the foil. I try to keep it close to the edge, but not super close that it is pushing resin off. So right there looks like a good spot to have it. I'm going to take some of the resin and pour it on top of it so that I can get the foil to stay with the piece without taking any of the resin from the edges or from the other piece itself. With this, you have to make sure it doesn't move around as well, just like the foil on the front. With that, I'm going to go through it again with a heat gun. And depending on how this cures, we may have to give it a second dome. I guess I should also mention that sometimes you don't have to do a second dome. You can always sand the sides if they're not as covered with resin as you want them to kind of even it out. But when possible, I kind of like to get as much resin on there as I can and then sand it if it's just a little scratchy around the edges. So we're going to again take this clear lid here that you can get from the Dollar Tree and put it over our piece to ensure that we don't have dust or anything land on it while it is curing.
Alright, so it's the next day. Our piece has cured on the back. And if you feel around it, you can feel if your resin reached the sides of it nicely, or maybe it didn't. Right here, it feels like it needs more resin, whereas this side feels like it's completely full on the side. But compared over here on this side, this needs more resin. Or if you really don't want to put more resin, you could always sand it off. But I want to make sure that it's all evened out, and that basically I would only sand the sides if there's just a little bit there that just needs to be sanded. I mean, probably gonna have to sand it even after the second dome, but I feel more comfortable doming it and making sure that this is gonna turn out nice. So I'm gonna be doing a second dome, but I won't be showing it because it's literally just the same thing that we did before, minus having to add this logo in there. So we're just gonna be putting more resin on top to dome it, and make sure that it's all nice on the sides and everything. And the second dome should be the only dome you need to do. Once you start to get to like 3 domes, 4 domes, you're just adding too much of a clear layer. So I'm not so sure how that's going to work out. You'll end up seeing, I was able to pick it up, that after so many layers, it starts building up a clear layer on your piece. Okay, we are back after doing a second dome, and just feeling it is better than before, but we still have a bit here. Let me move this out of the way. Here on the edge that could use some sanding. So I'm gonna go ahead and just take off the liquid latex and see how that did. It's just like the front when we took the liquid latex off. So you can see have some overspill here that I'll need to sand off. There we go. So tray looks good. I'm going to need to sand off these pieces, and I'll be sanding it off screen just because my sander doesn't reach. But I basically use a nail sander, and I just sand along any of the overspill pieces, any of the pieces I want to basically get down, and see how that goes. We made it to the end of the video. As you probably noticed, I didn't show the final look of me sanding or putting UV resin on the piece. Usually after I sand, I put UV resin on it to make it glossy again after sanding it because it ends up making it rough. But during sanding, I ended up seeing how I messed up the piece in the middle there. It really bummed me out because I spent all this time recording, and this was a custom piece. I'm currently working on a new tray for this customer, but I hope you still were able to learn something from this video, especially from my mistakes. We all make mistakes, but it's really hard to have to go through them and show them. Just know I make them all the time, so you're not alone. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the video. I hope this opens up being able to do future videos like this if I ever mess up on pieces again, which I'm sure I will. I do it all the time. There was still a lot of good information in the video despite the silly mistakes with the sun and my piece being soft, which I'm hoping I will continue to learn from, but pieces like that happen all the time. Overall, I hope you have a good day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye!